Draco's Blackpill Manifesto. 3 weeks had passed since Draco's humiliating rejection by Pansy Parkinson, and frankly, he wasn't handling it well. What had started as sulking in the slithering common room had evolved into something much more systematic and, according to his dorm mates, significantly more annoying. It began with the measurements. "Malfoy, what the hell are you doing?" Blaise Zabini asked one morning, finding Draco hunched over a magical measuring tape in front of the dormitory mirror. "Can't tilt," Draco muttered, adjusting the tape around his eye area. "Mine's only 3.2 degrees positive." "Do you know what that means?" "That you've lost your bloody mind." "It means I'm genetically inferior." Draco said this with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing the weather. "Look at this jawline measurement. 127 degrees. Pathetic. No wonder I can't get a date." Blaise stared at him. "Draco, you're literally one of the most conventionally attractive blokes in our year." "Conventionally attractive?" Draco whipped around, his grey eyes blazing. "Blaise, do you see this philtrum? It's 2.3 millimeters too long. My forward growth is barely adequate. And don't even get me started on my wrist circumference." "Your wrist?" 6 3/4 inches. That's framelet territory, Blaise. Women can subconsciously detect bone structure deficiencies from across a room. Blaise backed away slowly. "Right. I'm going to breakfast now." But Draco wasn't finished. Over the next few days, he began documenting everything. He had charts pinned to his bed, curtains showing ideal facial proportions, lists of genetic markers that supposedly determined romantic success, and what appeared to be a complex mathematical formula for calculating someone's sexual market value. "It's all genetics," he explained to a captive audience of younger Slytherins who were too intimidated to leave. "Everything. Your height, your facial structure, your coloring, it's all determined before birth. No amount of personality, money, or effort can overcome genetic inferiority. But you're rich and pureblood, squeaked a second year. Doesn't that count for something?" Draco laughed bitterly. "Money is cope. Status is cope. Even magic is cope. Do you think Pansy Parkinson rejected me because of my bank account? No. She rejected me because my hunter eyes aren't pronounced enough and my chin lacks forward projection." The second year looked terrified. "I don't understand what any of that means." "It means we're all doomed," Draco said dramatically. "The 90-10th rule is absolute. 90% of women only want the top 10% of men. The rest of us are genetic dead ends." Word of Draco's new philosophy began spreading through the school like a particularly virulent strain of dragon pox. It started with curious Slytherins asking questions, then spread to students from other houses who'd heard rumors about Malfoy's bizarre new obsession. "Have you seen him with those calipers?" whispered a Ravenclaw girl to her friend. "He's been measuring other students' faces during meals." Someone said he told Marcus Flint that his maxillar recession explained why he's never had a girlfriend, replied her friend. Flint didn't even know what a maxilla was. The situation escalated when Draco decided to hold what he called educational sessions in empty classrooms. These quickly became known around school as Draco's Doom Lectures, and they attracted an increasingly dedicated following of confused and insecure teenage boys. "Gather round, gentlemen," Draco would say, standing in front of a makeshift presentation board covered in anatomical diagrams and statistical charts. "Today we're discussing the fundamental biological realities that govern human attraction." His audience typically consisted of about a dozen boys from various houses, most of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else but were morbidly curious about what Draco would say next. "Now, observe this diagram of ideal male facial structure," Draco continued, pointing to a drawing that looked suspiciously like a movie star. "Note the pronounced brow ridge, the sharp jawline, the perfect facial thirds ratio. This is what women are biologically programmed to find attractive." A nervous Hufflepuff raised his hand. "But surely personality matters too." Draco's expression turned pitying. "Have you been paying attention at all? Personality is what ugly men tell themselves matters. Studies show that women make attraction decisions within milliseconds of seeing a face. Your personality doesn't even register until after the genetic assessment is complete. What studies? Asked a skeptical Ravenclaw. Marvel studies, Draco replied confidently. The Blackpill community has done extensive research on this. They've proven that attraction is purely genetic and hierarchical. Women are hypergamous by nature, they only date up in the genetic hierarchy. The boys looked around at each other uncertainly. Half of them seemed genuinely worried about their own genetic prospects, while the other half appeared to be wondering how they'd ended up in what was essentially a support group for romantic pessimists. So what are we supposed to do? Asked a particularly dejected-looking Gryffindor. Just give up. Acceptance, Draco said solemnly. Accept your genetic limitations. Stop coping with false hopes. The sooner you acknowledge that you are not genetically gifted, the sooner you can stop wasting time on futile romantic pursuits. That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard, muttered someone from the back. Truth is often depressing, Draco replied. But it's liberating too. Once you accept that your romantic failures aren't your fault, they are simply genetic inevitability, you can stop blaming yourself. The meetings grew larger and more elaborate. Draco created a ranking system for the school's male population based on what he called objective genetic markers. He had categories like Chad, Normie, Incel, and something called Truesalt, which apparently was reserved for the most genetically unfortunate. Now, let's analyze some of our fellow students, Draco announced during one particularly well-attended session. Cedric Diggory, obviously, is a Chad. Perfect bone structure, ideal height, naturally attractive to females. He represents the top 2% of genetic quality. Several boys nodded glumly. Most of you, Draco continued, fall into the normie category. Genetically average, capable of attracting equally average partners through significant effort and favorable circumstances. But this is increasingly rare due to female hypergamy. A Slytherin fourth year raised his hand. Where do you rank yourself, Draco? Draco's expression became pained. I'm what we call a failed Chad. Superior genetics ruined by minor but critical flaws. My canthal tilt is insufficient, my jaw lacks the proper angularity, and my frame is too narrow. I should be attractive, but genetic imperfections have relegated me to high-tier normie status. That still sounds better than most of us, someone pointed out. It's worse, Draco said seriously. Failed Chads suffer the most because we can see what we almost were. We're genetically close enough to true attractiveness to understand what we're missing, but far enough away that we can never achieve it. The philosophical implications of this statement seem to depress everyone present. Vincent Crowd, who had been attending these sessions mostly for the free biscuits Draco provided, finally spoke up. But what about personality? My mum always said I had a lovely personality. The room fell silent. Draco looked at Crowd with something approaching sympathy. Vincent, he said gently, your mother loves you. Mothers are biologically programmed to find their offspring appealing regardless of objective attractiveness. It's an evolutionary adaptation that ensures child survival. So my personality isn't lovely. Your personality is irrelevant to romantic success. You're what we call a personality cell, someone who's been told that personality matters when it demonstrably doesn't. Crab looked crushed. But I'm really funny. Humor is only attractive when it comes from genetically superior men, Draco explained. When attractive men make jokes, women find them charming. When unattractive men make the same jokes, women find them annoying or creepy. That's not fair, protested a Hufflepuff. Life isn't fair, Draco replied. That's the fundamental Blackpill truth. Fairness is a social construct designed to make genetic inferiors feel better about their circumstances. The sessions continued for weeks, with Draco becoming increasingly elaborate in his presentations. He created detailed charts showing the genetic hierarchy of Hogwarts students, developed formulas for calculating looks matching up potential, and even attempted to correlate Quidditch performance with facial bone structure. Athletic ability is directly connected to genetic quality, he explained to his rapt audience. Good genes create good athletes, which is why Quidditch stars are also typically the most romantically successful students. But what about studying? Asked a bookish Ravenclaw. Intelligence has to count for something. Draco shook his head sadly. Intelligence without looks is worthless for romantic success. You'll become a successful wizard, earn lots of money, and eventually some woman will settle for you after she's finished having fun with genetically superior men. You'll be what we call a beta-bucks, a provider rather than a genuine romantic choice. The Ravenclaw looked horrified. That's awful. It's reality, Draco said. Women have two categories, men they're attracted to and men they settle for. The lucky few get genuine desire. The rest get transactional relationships based on resource provision. By this point, Draco's influence had spread beyond his formal meetings. Boys throughout the school had begun obsessing over their physical features, measuring themselves against impossible standards, and developing increasingly fatalistic attitudes about their romantic prospects. The breaking point came when a group of first-years was found in the bathroom with measuring tapes, trying to determine their genetic rankings based on Draco's criteria. Professor McGonagall discovered them in tears, convinced they were doomed to romantic failure before they'd even reached puberty. What exactly is going on here? She demanded. We're subhumans, Professor, sobbed one 11-year-old. Draco Malfoy proved it with science. Our bone structure is inferior and no one will ever love us. But McGonagall's expression shifted from confusion to fury in record time. Where did you get these ideas? The Blackpill meetings, sniffled another first year. Draco says we're genetically inferior and should accept our fate as lonely outcasts. That evening, Draco was summoned to Professor Dumbledore's office, where he found the headmaster looking more tired than usual. Mr. Malfoy, Dumbledore began carefully, I understand you've been conducting some sort of educational outreach regarding human attraction. I've been sharing important scientific truths about genetic determinism in romantic selection, Draco replied proudly. The students deserve to know the reality of their situation. And this reality is that most of them are genetically inferior and will never experience genuine romantic love. They should accept this and stop coping with false hope. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Malfoy, do you truly believe that a person's worth is determined entirely by their physical appearance? Not their worth as a person, Draco clarified. Their worth as a romantic partner. These are different metrics entirely. I see. And you concluded that you yourself are romantically worthless. Draco's composure cracked slightly. I'm genetically flawed. My father's money and status can't overcome inferior bone structure. I'm destined to be rejected by women who are biologically programmed to seek superior genetic material. And this makes you feel liberated, Draco said, though his voice wavered. I no longer have to pretend that effort or personality or kindness matter. I can simply accept my genetic limitations and focus on other pursuits. Such as looks maxing, mostly. Optimizing my appearance within my genetic constraints. Though the improvements are marginal at best. Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Malfoy, I'm going to ask you to discontinue these meetings. Why? Are you afraid of the truth? I'm concerned about first-year students crying in bathrooms because they believe they're genetically inferior. They are genetically inferior. I'm just helping them understand why. Mr. Malfoy, perhaps we should discuss your own recent experiences with rejection and how they might be influencing your current worldview. Draco's face flushed. This isn't about pansy. This is about scientific reality. Is it? Because from my perspective, it seems like a young man who experienced romantic disappointment has decided that the entire concept of attraction is hopeless rather than simply accepting that one particular person wasn't interested. It's not just pansy, Draco said quietly. It's everyone. Do you know how many times I've been rejected this year? 17 times. 17 different girls, all for the same reason, insufficient genetic quality. Or perhaps, Dumbledore suggested gently, because you've become obsessed with measuring people's faces and explaining why they're biologically inferior. Draco paused, considering this. Are you saying my personality is the problem? I'm saying that telling someone their skull shape makes them romantically worthless is unlikely to endear you to them. But that's just being honest about genetic reality. Mr. Malfoy, do you enjoy being around people who constantly analyze your physical flaws and predict your romantic doom? Well, no. But that's because the truth is uncomfortable. Or because it's depressing, rude, and makes everyone around you feel terrible about themselves. Draco sat in silence for several minutes, clearly struggling with this concept. So you're saying I should lie to people about their genetic limitations? I'm saying perhaps you should consider that human attraction is more complex than skull measurements and that making everyone around you miserable isn't going to improve your own romantic prospects. But the science. Mr. Malfoy, that science you're referencing comes from Muggle internet forums populated by equally frustrated young men. It's not peer-reviewed research. Draco looked genuinely shocked. Are you saying the Blackpill isn't real? I'm saying that reality is considerably more nuanced than your current worldview suggests. But what about the 90-10th rule? What about genetic determinism? What about the fact that you spent the last month making yourself as unappealing as possible and then blaming your rejection on bone structure? This seemed to penetrate Draco's philosophical armor. He sat quietly for a moment, then asked, "So what am I supposed to do now?" Perhaps start by treating people like human beings rather than genetic specimens. See how that works out. And if it doesn't work, then you'll have learned something about yourself that has nothing to do with your canthal tilt. Draco left Dumbledore's office in a state of confusion. Everything he believed for the past month was being challenged, and he wasn't sure how to process it. But as he walked back to the Slytherin common room, he noticed something he hadn't seen in weeks. Other students weren't actively avoiding him. In fact, a few even nodded hello. Maybe, he thought reluctantly, there was something to this not being horrible to everyone approach. Though he still planned to check his jawline measurements one more time before bed. Just to be sure,